Welcome once again. We've had a few little hiccups the last couple of broadcast sessions, but we're back with another fantastic episode of Recording in Progress. We're going to be breaking some new ground today on the show, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Mr. Jim DeJesus.
It
How's it
broke
going,
new
Jim?
ground.
Oh my god!
Yes, we're going to be breaking some new ground here because we're going to be featuring a product review by an excellent product that both Jim and I personally endorse.
Oh,
Yes, we are. Not just delicious Negro Modelo, which is still the flavor sensation that's sweeping the nation. And because people are drinking delicious Negro Modelo, there's some interesting questions about the future of movies. If they decide to delay Tenet by Christopher Nolan, there may be no movies until Christmas.
Ooh. Dude, the Oscars are going to be so interesting next year.
That they are. So what do you think about the possibility of no movies till Christmas, Jim?
Well, any reason to delay New Mutants again, right? I mean, they're just looking for any reason to delay that one more time.
When I heard that they were announced the date, I'm like, saying, you know what's going to come out now to keep that movie from coming out? Disney's saying, listen, we need to delay this movie one more year to get another tax write-off on this movie. It'll have paid for itself by then.
Look. I know there's like conspiracy theories. They're all garbage, by the way, that like 5G is doing this and that it's like a secret bioweapon created by the government. Like, that's all crap. That's all garbage. You know what it is true? It is 20th Century Fox. They did create this bioweapon to make sure that New Mutants won't come out for another year. Prove me wrong.
But on a related bit of news from Deadline...
By the way, I'm joking, YouTube. Those were jokes. It's just all complete.
Those were jokes.
I'm an irony bro. I believe everything the government says is true. Yeah.
Now, we did, however, the movie theater industry has done a survey. Majority of moviegoers will return to cinema if COVID-19 safety guidelines are in place, EDO survey finds. Exclusive. Good news for big circuits, AMC, Regal, and Cinemark, and other movie theaters hoping to return to business in late June or early July, according to an updated EDO moviegoer study titled Movie Theaters and Social Distancing. 75% of respondents said that they were more likely to return to cinemas upon the reopening when Tenet, Mulan, and Russell Crowe's Unhinged hit if movie theaters implement certain safety regulations. What cinema safety protocols would encourage moviegoers to head back sooner? A lopsided 91% said theaters should have hand sanitizer stations throughout the building, while 86% are in favor of limited showtimes to allow for extended cleaning between screenings. I think that's a good idea in general. Other factors encouraging the movie-going population to come back inside the cinema: employees wearing face masks, employees getting their temperature checked before work, and attendees also wearing face masks.
Yeah.
Interestingly, nearly 60% of moviegoers are open to having their temperatures taken when they return to the cinema. About 5% believe no safety measures should be implemented.
Yeah,
Key to note?
Okay, sorry.
What's key to note in the latest survey from EDO is that when respondents were polled initially, they were asked outright if they'd return to cinema. Those respondents drew a near split reaction between likely 40% and unlikely 36%. However, with the implementation of desired safety measures, the ratio of respondents who said that they would be likely to return increased significantly from 40% to 75%. 80% of the EDO sample said their ability to RSVP seats also was a positive factor contributing to their decision to come back to the cinema. So what do you think about the return of people to the cinema after drinking delicious Negro Modelo?
So I think initially they should probably have these little plastic guards that I'm seeing everywhere. I don't think this should be a long-term thing. I think eventually they're just gonna have to get rid of them. This whole thing about like we have to have plastic things up everywhere just because a pandemic hit once is a bit much. It's a bit much, especially knowing all the things that we know about delicious Negro Modelo now versus what we understood it to be at the time of all that stuff. Not saying that it, all this stuff shouldn't have been done. However, long term, now we know that these type of beers are going to be kind of mutating and changing. It's going to be something like a seasonal flu. I don't think this is necessary long term. Short term, yeah, if it'll pacify a lot of people, help kind of curve the peak, but long term, no, it needs to go, especially but then again, at the same time, I did really like the idea that, like, if I got a movie seat before they shut down all these theaters, that there would be half full and I wasn't being packed in with a bunch of other people. That was nice. I really did enjoy that. Can we just keep that and the face masks?
There's been some additional details that have also came out in the survey. Other takeaways is, in the wake of COVID-19 outbreak, respondents still click on the same streaming services that they've been watching since before the crisis, and that's Netflix by 50%. Those who head to cable broadcast TV poll around 15%, Hulu at less than 15%, Amazon Prime at 10%, and Disney Plus at less than 10%.
Well, think of all the great shows that are on Amazon Prime. You have
Pickle Pickin'?
Pickle Pickin'. Deathstalker.
I will.
They had Deathstalker too.
I will say there are better things that I find on Amazon typically than I find on Disney Plus or Hulu, which I'll be talking about a little bit later in the show.
Yeah.
Also, in the wake of Universal's PVOD disruption with the $100 million grossing Trolls World Tour, which made more money than it would have made if it was actually presented in theaters, and more titles like Warner Brothers.
Did they give a number?
Scoob!
What was the number they gave?
$100 million it made. And they don't have to split that with anybody. That's just $100 million straight to the studio. And that was just like the initial distribution was $100 million.
I hope this doesn't become a trend, because I was hoping it was going to be a lot lower.
Well, the trade association's cracking down on Universal, so we'll see. But
Okay.
Scoob also came out, but not as many people liked Scoob this weekend. And there's also Universal's The King of Staten Island. But 35% of movie-going audiences are not familiar with PVOD menus, and 29% occasionally browse, and only 26% actually use it. So it's not an answer yet for everything. And yeah, so are you looking forward to coming back into theaters as soon as
Yes.
the wonderful city of lost wages lets you come back?
Yeah, I just hope that AMC survives this. They're not. I just hope they survive this, and I get to keep my movie pass.
Well, the big rumor is Jeff Bezos is going to buy them out.
I hope it's included with my Amazon Prime. That'd be nice.
That would be a great package benefit on Amazon Prime. But because of the crisis related to delicious Negro Modelo, we've been confusing computers.
Good.
And we used to talk a lot more about things like this, but nothing's really popped out at me. But this article from Science Alert made me want to say, okay, let's cover this. Our behavior in this pandemic has seriously confused AI machine learning systems. The chaos and uncertainty surrounding the coronavirus pandemic have claimed an unlikely victim: machine learning systems that are programmed to make sense of our online behavior. The algorithms that recommend products on Amazon, for instance, are struggling to interpret our new lifestyles, MIT Technology Review reports. And while machine learning tools are built to take new data, they're typically not so robust that they can adapt dramatically as needed. For example, MIT Tech reports that a company that detects credit card fraud needs to step in and tweak its algorithm to account for a surge of interest in gardening equipment and power tools. An online retailer found that its AI was ordering stock that was no longer matched with what it was selling, and the firm that uses an AI to recommend investments based on sentiment analysis of news stories was confused by the generally negative tone throughout the media. The situation is so volatile, Rael Klein, a name that sounds like she's an AI computer algorithm, CEO of the algorithmic marketing consulting firm Nozzle, told MIT Tech, "You're trying to optimize for toilet paper last week, and this week everybody wants to buy puzzles or gym equipment." While some companies are dedicating more time and resources to manually steering algorithms, others see this as an opportunity to improve. A pandemic like this is the perfect trigger to build better machine learning models. So, what do you think about this, Jim, and computers trying to figure us out?
It's spooky. It's very spooky and concerning, but I'm glad they're having hiccups. Mind you, these machine learning stuff is what's really causing all the big problems of the tech giants. Fang. All the reasons why Fang sucks. All the reasons why, all these stupid censorship things keep happening all the time. It's just because machine learning sucks.
And it is easier to have the machines learn things if corporations and other structures of hierarchy and political power make an effort to streamline everybody's behavior.
More like to get it to scale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another news article that I saw of a related topic that we haven't done a lot of in a while, but I said, man, this is pretty good. I'll cover this one too. Google antitrust suit being drafted by the Justice Department. Department of Justice has been investigating Google over ad market since 2019. Complaint signals investigators are preparing for litigation. The U.S. Department of Justice is that was his Justice Department, but U.S. Department of Justice sounds better. It's drafting a lawsuit against Alphabet Inc.'s Google, accusing the internet giant of violating antitrust laws, according to a person familiar with the matter. The Justice Department has been investigating Google for nearly a year over whether the company is thwarting competition in the digital advertising market where it holds a dominant position on such methods as YouTube. A draft complaint doesn't necessarily... Exactly. That too. Mm-hmm. A draft complaint doesn't necessarily mean that government will ultimately sue Google, but it signals investigators working on the case believe that there's enough evidence to start preparing for litigation, said the person who declined to be identified because the probe is confidential. Spokesman for the Justice Department declined to comment. A lawsuit against Google would mark the most significant action against the company by U.S. enforcers in the EU. Google has been fined billions of dollars for abusing its dominance and harming competition. But U.S. antitrust officials have been hands-off since the Federal Trade Commission, which shares antitrust jurisdiction with the Justice Department, closed an investigation in 2013. All that changed in 2017 when the Trump administration took power. Wanting to take a hard look at Google, Bloomberg has reported by then Google and its fellow tech giants were facing a much less welcoming environment in Washington, where Democrats and Republicans raised concerns over massive collections of user data, failure to police content on their platforms, and claims that they're monopolizing markets. The Justice Department opened the Google probe last summer. State attorney generals involved. State attorney generals are also investigating the company. The Wall Street Journal reported earlier that Google will likely be sued by the states and the Justice Department. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who is leading the coalition of 51 attorneys general, said Thursday that states are on a good path to complete the investigation soon. Google said in a statement that it's engaging with the ongoing investigations led by the Department of Justice and the attorneys general, in Attorney General Paxton, though. Again, it should really be, say, attorneys general, because that would be a more appropriate response. And it's focused on providing services that help consumers support thousands of businesses and enable increased choice and competition. Although Paxton's investigation focuses on digital ads, some states within the investigation have also pursued other areas such as search and mobile software, Bloomberg has reported. States would likely band together on a single complaint, although some of the attorneys general might want to drop off before a lawsuit is filed, a person familiar with the matter says. So what do you think about Google getting in hot water with the government?
I'm not buying it. There's lots of different search. I guess it really depends on where you want to advertise. And most people want to advertise on where everybody's eyes are, and that's Google. Mm-hmm. But they're not the only players in town. There's still a lot of people who use Twitter, which is they have their own advertising. You have Facebook, which is probably one of the best buys in terms of advertising. If you advertise your business, Facebook is where you want to be, more so than AdWords. But yeah.
So do you think
not a big fan of these antitrust things? Not a big fan of them ever.
No, but I mean, do you think we're going to see a major change in how the world is situated because of this new political situation with lawsuits against Google?
Well, yeah, it's going to be. And they're going to go after Facebook next.
Let's hope.
Let's hope.
Now, we had some big celebrity death news during the time between shows.
Mm-hmm.
Little Richard, founding father of rock, who broke musical barriers, dead at 87. Pianist singer behind Tutti Frutti, Good Golly, Miss
Rudy.
Molly, and Long Tall Sally. Yes. Set the template that a generation of musicians would follow. Richard, a founding father of rock and roll, whose fervent shrieks, flamboyant garb, and joyful gender-bending persona embodied the spirit and sound of the new art form, died Saturday. He was 87. The musician's son, Danny Jones Penniman, confirmed the pioneer's death to Rolling Stone. The cause of death was bone cancer. Ooh, that's not good.
No, that's a really bad one.
According to his lawyer, Billy Sobel, starting with Tutti Frutti in 1956, Richard cut up a series of unstoppable hits. Long Tall Sally and Rip It Up the same year. Lucille in 1957. Lucille is actually one of my favorite songs he did. Good Golly Miss Molly in 1958. Driven by the simple, pumping piano, gospel-influenced vocal exclamations, and sexually charged, often gibberish lyrics. I heard Little Richard and Jerry Lee Lewis, and that was it. Elton John told Rolling Stone in 1973. Actually, this is what you were talking about.
Yeah.
That what his biggest influence is not so much his own music, but all the people he influenced.
Yeah. So a lot of people are. I mean, there's lots of people who are influenced by Elton John, Beatles, but not too many people cite him as an influence. However, people are influenced more by the people that he's inspired. I think those people went on to go do better things. And not bashing him. Tutti Frutti is a great song. Don't get me wrong, but I'd much rather listen to who he's influenced.
But on a related note to that,
secondhand.
Although he never hit the top 10 again after 1958, Little Richard's influence was massive. The Beatles recorded several of his songs, including Long Tall Sally, and Paul McCartney singing on those tracks in the Beatles' own I'm Down paid tribute to Little Richard's shredded throat style. His songs became a part of rock and roll canon, covered over the decades by everyone from the Everly Brothers, the Kinks, Clean's Clearwater Revival, to Elvis Costello and the Scorpions.
Yep.
Elvis popularized rock and roll. Stephen Van Zandt tweeted after the news broke, Chuck Berry was the storyteller, Richard was the archetype.
Yep.
And
so we should probably talk about this because I'm seeing this right now. I don't think this was in your thing, but Fred Willard just passed away.
That is actually the next one.
Oh.
That is the next article.
Yep.
Also from Rolling Stone magazine. Fred Willard, best in show and a mighty wind actor, dead at 86.
Oh, I see it now. I didn't see it in the list because I think I saw that link and I was like, oh, I already clicked that link. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Prolific comic actor and master of mockumentaries, starred in Modern Family and Everybody Loves Raymond alongside Waiting for Guffman and This Is Spinal Tap. This Is Spinal Tap is an excellent movie and really great. You should do something nice for yourself and watch that when you can.
Yeah, and turn your volume up to 11.
Exactly. Fred Willard, the prolific and beloved comedy actor and master of the mockumentary genre, who stood out in the ensemble comedies like Best in Show, For Your Consideration, and This Is Spinal Tap, died Friday at the age of 86. Willard's rep, Glenn Schwartz, confirmed the death to Rolling Stone, adding that the cause of death was natural causes. Willard's daughter, Hope Mulbarger, said in a statement, "My father passed away very peacefully last night at the fantastic age of 86 years old. Kept moving, working, and making us happy until the very end. We loved him so very much. We will miss him forever." Jamie Lee Curtis, wife of Willard's longtime director Christopher Guest, first shared news of the actor's death. "How lucky that we all got to enjoy Fred Willard's gifts." Curtis tweeted, "He is with his Miss Mary now. Thanks for the deep belly laughs, Mr. Willard." Willard's wife of 40 years, Mary, died in 2018. And yeah. Let's see here. Anything else? Of course, Ed Begley, a guy who's been in a bunch of things with him, also is referenced in this article here. So what's the big thing for you with? Actually, did you see A Mighty Wind?
No.
We need to watch that one because A Mighty Wind is all about folk music. And it's like a mockumentary about folk music. We need to set that up.
Yeah, we do.
As something to watch in the future.
And Rum Raven, excuse me, Rum Raven has always been pushing me to listen to more folk music, and I'm like, dude, I just don't. I'm not a big fan of Neutral Milk Hotel, but okay. I guess now you're forcing me into it too. So.
Well, I mean, this is more of a mockumentary about the genre of music.
Yeah, maybe we should dig into a folk album, a really good folk album for the next one.
That would be pretty good.
Yeah.
I like that. So we're going to do something we've never done before. We're going to do a product review.
Product review?
A product review. You know, the product that we both purchased that you made.
Oh, yeah.
So do you want to post a picture of me wearing the fantastical product or a picture of you wearing it?
Well, go ahead and talk about it while I dig out that picture.
So we're living in a challenging age right now where you all have to wear a mask. And Jim, a mask enthusiast for reasons of personal politics, since there's horrible governmental computers out there trying to scour the internet for your image, he thought, I should make a mask and sell to people. One that references my personal interests and things I enjoy. And one of the things we enjoy is the Bane posting meme. So Jim decided he was going to reference Bane in one of those scenarios. So did you pick up the picture?
Up. Yeah, you're up. You are up.
So yes, I am modeling this very, very handsome mask. So, Jim, where can people buy this wonderful product?
You can go to store.lolberts.com, LOLBERTS.com, lolberts.com. Actually, I'll post a link in the thing. And, copy image location. There you go. And then here's me wearing it while also wearing my Bane mask. There you go. And I will fetch that link for you.
So what's interesting about that mask is there's actually enough material I can pull it over most of my head.
Yeah, so can I. And I have a big dome too.
Yeah.
We're big dome guys.
You
but you've got a big head.
I'm not sure I can say that on YouTube. The correct response to that.
The correct response is for you.
So I like the material. It's like a good t-shirt material. I'm not entirely sure how efficacious it is for stopping coronavirus and things, but it's the only mask I've been able to wear that's been comfortable in all of this new mask wearing frenzy that we're going through.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to be picking up the other mask that I made that has like my kind of YouTube kind of, let's see, let's paste this. So kind of my kind of YouTube style stuff on there. My logo is on the side, but you can't see it. It's just right around the corner where those little spiky orange things are coming out. That's where the logo is. I didn't pick up on it, but yeah. So I got that one. And then, of course, we all know that you all love your delicious, delicious Negro Modelo. Why is it showing up for female? Oh, there we go. And then we also have, you can, next time you could wear the shirt while you're at your favorite Mexican eatery and tell your waitress, Negra, please.
It's always important to let them know what kind of beer you want to order
right.
when you're going into your favorite Mexican eatery.
Yeah.
So, Jim, those little dots on the mask, are those like actually dots for,
Oh, it's the breathing holes for the mask. Here, let me pull up a picture of Bane's mask so you can actually see. Get a good picture of his mask. And I don't know why Google likes to always insist that I want to find the 200 by 200 pixel picture of any picture I'm trying to look up, but it wants to show me those instead. Give me a good picture of Bane wearing his mask, please. There is none. whatever. This will work. So yeah, so you can see there's little holes in his mask, 'cause that's what it was supposed to be. So there you go.
Yeah. And now we're going to go into what we do every show. We're going to do an album review.
Yeah, because Larry watches a bunch of movies. I watch a bunch of movies. I listen to a lot of music. You listen to a lot of music. But scales are a little bit tipped. Me for more in music and you more in film. So while you're opening me up to the wide world of film, I'm opening up to you the wide world of music. And we're going to be doing another... I think this was kind of... Little Richard's death kind of reminded me of this person, who is Arthur Brown. The band he is in is called The Crazy World of Arthur Brown, and the album is The Crazy World of Arthur Brown. You may have not have heard of him, but you've definitely heard his influence kind of woven into many different artists. In fact, he was very influential even to the people that he used to tour with, like The Doors. Here, actually, I have a list of all the bands that he used to tour with and influenced. If I can grab it. Here we are. The Who, Jimi Hendrix, Mothers of Invention, The Doors, Joe Cocker, The Small Faces. He only had one hit. It didn't reach number one, but to be fair, the only reason why it didn't reach number one was because he was going up against that week. A little tune you may have heard of, kind of a obscure artist now, Hey Jude by the Beatles. For number two, while that's out, that's still might as well count that as a number one hit. If you're going up against the Beatles, I think it's kind of beating everybody except Mike Tyson, right?
You remember that movie about the guy who woke up in the world where the Beatles didn't exist? So would that mean that he would have been number one in that world?
Yes, he would have.
You know, that movie really missed the mark on some of the interesting implications of what if the Beatles never actually existed.
Right, because they had to have a love story involved. I do think that, well, they did touch on a little bit of it. Oasis didn't exist.
I mean, is that really, though, all that problematic?
I do like their first album. I'm not gonna lie, it's not bad. But at the end of the day, it's fairly forgettable. But either way, send hate mail to jim@jimjesus.com. No, so I mean, there's not much to talk about this in terms of like what this is. There is one particular song on here. I think that's the highlight of the album, which is "Fire," which is the one that reached the top 10. It's definitely this album does have a lot of energy, even in the kind of slower, kind of moving parts of it. There's definitely a lot of energy and flair to it. And if you see him performing some of his songs, the guy has a lot of energy, including setting a weird-looking crown that he wears on fire while he sings "Fire." It's kind of amazing. The guy was definitely a showman. He also influenced a lot of the kind of acts that would move on later, like Alice Cooper, who put on these kind of outfits and stuff like that. That was mostly coming from Arthur Brown. It's kind of weird because if you ask most people, they won't not have a single... Did you know who Arthur Brown was before I showed you this album?
I didn't, no.
Yeah, most people don't, but he is very, very influential in the music scene, even though you've never heard of him. And it's kind of sad that he didn't get a lot of the attention that he deserves. It also didn't help...
He's still touring until fairly recently?
No, he is still touring. Well, because of COVID, no, he's not touring. But he is, for all intents and purposes, he's still touring. And he's still doing his show, and he's still doing all the crazy stuff, dancing around with his head on fire, even though he lost all of his hair. But that's genetic, not because of the fire. He's a baldy like us. But anyways, definitely recommend this album. It's especially if you like psychedelic stuff. It's unfortunate that his follow-up album wasn't released until that was recorded in 1969. It was not released until 1985. And the reason why is because it was very much kind of like a Captain Beefheart type of thing, where it's kind of very artsy, kind of bizarre, like what the fuck am I listening to type of album, which we should cover at some point once we want to start getting weird again. But he also did a lot of other side projects and other bands and stuff, and it's very kind of like the progressive psychedelic kind of feel that you get from a lot of those bands at the time, like proto
Yeah.
progressive rock.
And that's really what stood out for me about the album is it had that sound. It had that unmistakable sound to it.
Yeah. Definitely worth checking out, especially if you kind of like weird psychedelic proto progressive rock stuff. This is definitely right up your alley. And you'll probably start listening to it and start noticing like, oh, I've heard this band do something like that. I heard this band doing it, and it came from him. Yeah.
So we're going to do something we haven't done in a bit, and that's just because
we haven't done anything in a bit because we haven't done a show in 2 weeks.
We're going to talk a little bit about some of the hot new crowdfunding stuff that is coming out, and we're starting with a strong book called Vestige. So, Vestige is a comic book. First of all, this is a slight variation on the cover. The cover and the physical media on the outside of the book are amazing, and this is the titular main character. Doesn't this strong, compelling image make you want to buy the book?
For reasons other than the story, yes.
The story's pretty good. Donald DeLay, who's did some work within the mainstream comic book industry, does most of your interior artwork. And the story is kind of an urban fantasy sort of story. It's about supernatural weapons and how they travel around the world and cause some chaos and mayhem. And the cowgirl is going to London, England to stop one of the bad weapons that's there. And art's very good, very strong. Story is very good for an introduction. The only thing I would give as a quibble to the story is it's very much we're setting you up for the next book in the franchise kind of story. The story doesn't give you, in my personal opinion, enough to say, hey, you're here on a ride and here's Nick Fury at the end of Iron Man to talk to you about the Avengers Initiative.
Oh.
And that's fine. Right. But that, again, it's a good story. It's definitely upper third quality story for a lot of different comic books that are being out on the independent scene. Better than a lot of the comic books that are being published by professional publishers. This book, however, is different than a lot of the stuff in the Comicsgate movement is because it was fronted directly by War Campaign. War Campaign is a fan movement that has a bit of a reputation because they tend to be a little brisk. They tend to make some salty memes out there on the internet. They tend to be very aggressive against people who they think are trying to cheat the fans. And this is their attempt at making a project to show, no, we're not just here to be guys throwing peanuts from the peanut gallery. We're here to produce good quality work. And it speaks volumes to the strong leadership that they showed in putting this book together. It had good editorial direction. It was well thought out, well designed. Character designs were all strong. It's a good book. I would definitely recommend purchasing it. The next book on the list is T-Bird and Throttle. I've actually reviewed prior iterations of the book. So T-Bird and Throttle is about a superhero who's got his powers because of alien spaceship stuff, and he takes a car theme to it. Of course, things went wrong in his life. He's kind of a down on his luck superhero. And this is the third book where we finally start to see, oh yeah, here's what's not talked about. Here's what the dark secret is for the superhero. But this art is a lot different. Can you get a little bit? Yeah. So this art is kind of more like the Batman the Animated Series kind of art.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely wants to have more of a cartoony feel to it while juxtaposing that with darker themes and darker storyline content. And it does represent great stuff like that classic She-Hulk cover there from back in the day. And it has a nice redhead on the cover. This is a story that it does have a beginning story that's a beginning story, but it also is more complete. That's why I definitely like this series of books. The writer is very good. The art is very good for the style it's trying to go for. It's effectively designed from start to finish. Again, I strongly recommend picking that up because there's going to be a fourth one coming out. That's going to be the fourth act of the series of stories. And I don't know what they're going to do with these characters, if anything, after that. And this is one of the few comic books that's actually in this thing that's near the end of what feels like a natural progression for the stories. So that's going to be something to see what happens to these independent comic books that are being produced when they tell a complete story. What's next for those creators, the audiences and fans they, engage with. Do those people show up for the next project? Is it, instead of a brand loyalty for a character or a studio or a production, it's a brand loyalty for the writer and creators? We'll have to find out and see. And on a related note to that, Richard C. Meyer, who is one of the people who was a real start off in this movement, did a sequel to Iron Sights. So from a strictly business standpoint, Iron Sights is the bigger money-making comic book he's been producing. Because the artist, who's a friend of mine on Facebook, is a lower price on his art, but that's also because he's trying to have a very exploitation style in his artwork for the interiors.
I can
So
see.
the price point, well, actually, those are cover pieces, and that's a poster piece. So if you scroll down a little bit more, you'll see some of Ibai's artwork. Yeah, right there. That's his style. He wants it to look very gritty, very raw, very exploitation, very violent, and it really works for the story. And this is just like a story about, revenge, murder, and the Mexican drug cartels. That's what the whole book is about. And about the people who become consumed by the life of violence, connects them to what's going on, what went on in Iraq and Afghanistan. So the book has a much lower price point of being made, and getting higher quality art talent really lowers your profit margin on these books. So this book made $100,000, but it probably cost somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 6 to produce the book, maybe another 1,000 to do all the printing and mailing. So it makes a huge return on investment on his profit. And he uses this book to help finance the rest of his production. That said, this story was not as engaging as the first one for me, even though the first one was a lot more awkward and confusing. I'm not going to jump back in for the third one of these. Whereas the other two of these comic books I reviewed, I would definitely jump back into them. This is not to say that the story is not a complete story or a whole story or a well-written story. It's just, there's nothing hooking me in. And even the very beautiful artwork that you're focusing the screen on there isn't really strong enough to keep me back on this train. So we got next up on our review cavalcade, the Clone Wars finale of the show. So the Clone Wars animated series was set up as a kids animated version of the Clone Wars movies done as part of the prequels by George Lucas. It was originally just a one and done shot movie. Later on, Lucasfilm, before the acquisition by Disney, produced a long-running series for it to be presented on Cartoon Network. And they had a penultimate final season they were in production with that they never got to finish because Disney wanted to shut that down, and this wasn't lined up with Disney's corporate priorities. But a little thing called Disney Plus happened, and they needed this to line up with their priorities. Because they needed a reason for people to get back on Disney Plus. COVID-19 happened. This series was rolling out around the same time, and it gave people a reason to get engaged with it. And the final story arc is done. Dave Filoni, who's one of the creative masterminds behind The Mandalorian, finished his series in strong form. So the last 4 episodes are all about the final battle of the Clone Wars in Mandalore. I did not know about the Club Penguin servers being shut down due to sexual abuse allegations, but that wouldn't surprise me. So, the Siege of Mandalore is all about a battle to get Darth Maul out of Mandalore because to get him as an intelligence source, punish him for his various criminal misdeeds and whatnot. Ahsoka, who was the Padawan learner for Anakin Skywalker, has left the Jedi Order, but she's trying to finish this business because it's the right thing to do, and she feels that Jedi, even though she no longer considers herself one, need to do the right thing by the people. So she and a group of Mandalorian warriors raid the planet to try to recapture Darth Maul, leads to a little overthrow of a government, and Darth Maul tells her, listen, everything's about to go horribly wrong. But you and I together, we can come together, we can stop the problem with the Emperor, we can save the galaxy. We could argue about what happens at the end. This block of 4 episodes should have been a movie. It had strong voice acting. They actually brought Ray Park in to do the physical motion capture acting for Darth Maul again. It's a very strong presentation, played on all the years of this show and all the years of the characters that were interplayed in here. And you got to see Order 66 from somebody who was able to successfully survive it, which was Ahsoka. And they explained how Order 66 happened, how it was all set up. And they tied these 4 episodes seamlessly with the prequel movies, to the point that there's actually fan edits that tie the scenes back to back together from them. So it's a very good presentation. But realistically, now that we see the final season together, there wasn't really enough material for a final season. It was, let's tie some loose ends up, and then we go from there. Tie up a few loose ends, and then get to the money shot of the Siege of Mandalore. So, because of this being finished, I now no longer have a reason to keep my Disney Plus and Hulu service subscription until the new season of The Orville comes out. Or possibly when Artemis Fowl comes out. But again, that would be a one and done kind of scenario. So, Jim, I know you haven't jumped back onto Disney Plus. What would it take for you to sign back up to Disney Plus as a service to help out the mouse in its time of trouble and need?
Song of the South.
Really, that's the only thing that you'd be willing to jump in on?
I want the version that Walt Disney only played at parties.
Oof. Oof. But I mean, like, the big thing that it would take for me to is that there really isn't enough content for me. Now, if I had a kid that I wanted to just plug in front of a TV and say, listen, let the TV raise you, then that might be a good enough investment for me. But I just don't really see it with Disney Plus as a service or Hulu as a service. Netflix, while there's a lot of garbage on Netflix, there's always a lot of content I want to see. Amazon Prime, there's randomly interesting periods of, oh, hey, here's like 5 or 6 things that I haven't seen in forever, and 2 or 3 interesting originals that I'll want to watch.
Yeah, here's a documentary. Oh, it's been 3 days. Let's take it down. We'll get into that one.
Yes, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, again, if you haven't had the opportunity to watch it, I definitely recommend you watch it because it is really the type of Star Wars storytelling that Disney should be doing to make money, but for some reason they're not interested in making money. I don't know why, especially now that they're hemorrhaging money, that they're not interested in making money. So let's talk about something terrible I watched on Netflix. Let's talk about Hollywood. So Jim, Hollywood likes to retell its stories of its glory days because it thinks that people are more interested in that. And in general, it likes to tell very inside baseball Hollywood and Los Angeles stories. So this one is different in it thinks it's different in a good way, but it's actually different in a worse way. It's like, what if instead of classic Hollywood being racist, what if it's just as racist as it is today, and we can create some very interesting things that happen? So it's all about a fictional movie about a actual Hollywood actress who committed suicide by jumping off the Hollywood sign, and how a Hollywood studio decides to make a movie about it, which is in and of itself a deeply navel-gazing exercise. And it becomes the first interracial movie in Hollywood. Here's the problem: it sweeps the Oscars, so that's not even a spoiler really for the movie. Sweeps the Oscars, but there are two movies that it brushes out of the Oscars that are actually kind of fascinating once you actually learn this. It in the alternate history replaces two movies that focus on anti-Semitism that were widely popular and were widely acclaimed because they had good acting, good quality directing, good quality storytelling. So instead, that's replaced in this fictional Hollywood of a very generic, very bland love story between a white man and a black woman, and the white man convinces the black woman not to kill herself. What is that telling us about this creator's perspective on Hollywood?
Not sure. Sounds terrible though.
It is. So the titular main character is a white Midwestern cornbread sort of guy who's trying to break into acting, but he's kind of terrible at it. And he gets his big break by becoming a male prostitute and meeting the wife of the studio boss.
Oh.
And also meeting several people who work in the casting department.
Oh no.
Now, if you were making a TV show that talked about prostitution for men in the 1940s, would you want to make it just a completely, it's great to be a prostitute story? That there's no downside on being a prostitute whatsoever?
Well, there definitely was in the 40s. That was before birth control.
Yeah. And the main character is forced into a situation where he's asked to be gay for pay. And he doesn't want to be gay for pay, so he has to find somebody to be gay for pay instead of him, which is the writer of the movie Meg. It starts as Peg, but later becomes Meg when they switch the race of the main character, who's a gay person of color who ends up in this alternate history finding and falling in love with Rock Hudson, who comes out of the closet in 1947 to everybody at the Academy Awards. Rock Hudson, he's also a terrible actor. And he's represented by an actual real-world agent who was reportedly gay and who may have slept with people as a power and control mechanism. So they have a Harvey Weinstein-like character. So do you think they ended the movie with him, the miniseries with him getting his just desserts, or does he get redeemed too?
I guess he gets redeemed.
Yeah.
That's not good. Not a good look.
It's not good. Not good at all. They also have a half Asian director who's a Filipino, but he calls himself half Asian in 1948, which isn't a thing that would have happened. A Filipino wouldn't want to associate himself with the dirty Japanese after World War II. That's not realistic. So this movie wants to be a contemporary racial dialogue, but also take the benefit of all of the racism of the late 40s. And also have it so that the people who run a studio, yes, it is very much an anti Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that the people who run a studio could just, do whatever they want. They said that to make this movie successful, they did a nationwide simultaneous release, and it was, at the time, the biggest movie opening ever. And following up on it, they're going to make a gay romance movie starring Rock Hudson in 1949, 1950, in this bizarre alternate reality. But the studio is not willing to do this progressive message movie about a black actress who they flip the script on and not have her commit suicide, because that would be weird to have a black actress just kill herself because she doesn't feel she's good enough. Only after Eleanor Roosevelt tells them it's okay. Only then do they have the courage to follow up on their convictions. So
I'm gonna
this
pass.
is a hard pass. This is not good. It's only good to watch if you are fascinated in seeing bad things that get a major push and a major budget, and you're like trying to say, how did this happen? The guy who played Sheldon from Big Bang Theory plays the gay movie agent who's great up until he has his redemption. The guy who's the pimp for the male prostitute service, also an excellent acting thing. And they talk about how, yeah, everyone was gay in Hollywood and having gay orgies, but they don't, say, gay, powerful people hiding their home, exploiting people who wanted to break into the industry. Isn't that a little dirty or gross? Nope, nope. This show didn't want to look at that. Didn't want to examine that bit of off-color commentary. So next up is the Ip Man series.
Oh, I didn't know Kinsella was in. I didn't even know he acted in movies.
that was not the Ip Man.
Oh.
No, that's not
Oh,
the
IP
no.
man. Okay, intellectual property. Okay, I get it. Funny. Haha.
No. This is Ip Man, not IP Man.
Okay. He's an intellectual property lawyer.
And while this is an image for the fourth movie in the series, if you scroll down a little bit, I picked this image because, just look at how cool that is. Him on that traditional kung fu training device. It's on fire. That looks awesome. So, you've heard of a little guy named Bruce Lee, right?
Rings a bell.
You've heard of Wing Chun Kung Fu, right?
No.
Well, that's the kung fu that Bruce Lee pioneered. But
I thought that was Jeet Kune Do.
No, that's the one he invented.
Oh, okay.
But he also pioneered Wing Chun in the United States. So Ip Man was Bruce Lee's master. And these three movies tell 3 of 4 parts. The fourth movie is the final movie of the journey of this legendary martial arts master. So it's historical, kind of, sort of, but it's also a kung fu action movie, so they throw in the sort of action and conflicts that happen in a kung fu action movie. So the first movie starts before World War II starts, and he's a rich, well-respected kung fu master. There's some fights happening, but the actual plot of the movie doesn't start until the Japanese invade. He's been ejected from his home. He's living in a ramshackle hovel, and the Japanese start rounding up Chinese martial arts masters and forcing them to fight for food as a form of sport and entertainment. And Ip Man just decimates all the karate guys that the Japanese put up against him. Just beats the snot out of them. He starts training the citizens for martial arts, for discipline, self-control, self-respect, to get them to fight back. But not literally fight back, because obviously it's an army with guns, but, stand strong. But eventually the general occupying the city challenges him to a competition, and he beats him, and that is the spark that starts the uprising of the people. The second movie in the series is Ip Man goes to Hong Kong, because the communists took over everything. He doesn't have his giant palatial estate or any of that stuff. The people who were family friends that he invested in, they all lost their stuff. All of them are living kind of like refugees in Hong Kong. It is about him figuring out how to break into the Hong Kong martial arts world and be accepted there as a master, which he eventually does, but they're being disrespected by a racist British boxer who brutally murders one of his friends that he becomes friends with after a struggle to gain respect. And he beats that guy and talks about how everybody deserves their dignity. And the third movie it's again, it's a narrative about how foreign occupiers are corrupting the Chinese people. But this movie has a more interesting story because it's not really about that in so much as it's about how Ip Man, because he's this folk hero martial artist guy, hasn't been paying attention to his wife and she's dying of cancer. It's also notable because Mike Tyson is in there, has a little cameo, and Mike Tyson and Donnie Yen fought for about 3 minutes of screen time. And it's all about a young upstart martial arts master at the end who's trying to upstage Ip Man as the greatest Wing Chun master. But Ip Man teaches him the true spirit of Kung Fu, which is, respect for your family, traditions, yada, yada, yada. These are very good movies if you like Hong Kong Kung Fu martial arts movies. If you don't like them, they're also really good movies, but there is a certain buy-in and certain challenges that you have to get through because these are movies that were filmed in Chinese and their perspective is more Chinese in orientation. The third movie gets a little bit more westernized and the fourth movie does as well. This series also has a spin-off movie about the younger master from the third movie that's starting out, and the fourth movie has Ip Man coming to the United States and facing racial prejudice and conflict there. And he's going to punch people until the conflict goes away. Donnie Yen's an excellent actor in this series. The Kung Fu and martial arts action is very good. There's not too much story that you get bogged down in the difference in language. It's a good time. All three of these are on Netflix right now, and I think they're going to be rolling out the fourth one on Netflix. So if you have Netflix, this is a good time. You should watch it and do yourself a favor and watch something that looks good. And now for something that doesn't look good. Solar Opposite. So, Jim, have you ever watched Rick and Morty?
The first two seasons were great. I gave up after the third season, and the fourth season is just awful.
So, what if Rick isn't an alcoholic? And what if Jerry isn't married to Rick's daughter, and he's less incompetent and less stupid? But not stupid, but less stupid. And they have two children, and they're space aliens that are trying to take over the Earth, but they're really stupid about it.
Wait, you said it's Rick and Morty? I'm out.
Basically, yeah, it's basically.
I'm already out. Before all the changes, I'm out. Now, if you want to say it's Rick and Morty like season 1 and season 2, but with a change, I'm interested. It's not.
No, it's not. It's not.
No.
And it's a bunch of episodic shenanigans that don't really mean anything. And it's just really tiresome. And I watched this one a lot like Hollywood to say, like, this was a lot of money went into this. And it's already been renewed because there's a Rick and Morty fan base that will just watch this. And it's the planet they came from is called Schlorp or Schlorpo or something like that. I don't know why Justin Roiland thinks those sorts of noisy names are funny.
It's funny the first couple times, and then it's just okay.
It's like, okay, you keep doing that bit. Oh, that's unfortunate that you keep doing that bit. The kids are actually have an interesting dynamic because they're genderless aliens, but they chose when they came to Earth one to be a boy and one to be a girl. So they had an episode about the girl alien trying to break through the patriarchy. Oh. So that was at least entertaining. And she had to get advice from her teacher at Dave & Buster's because that's where she works because she doesn't make enough money as a teacher teaching feminist theory to high school students. So it's not a good show. I don't recommend it. But let's talk about wine.
Oh, okay. Let's do that. So, the sales for alcohol during this delicious Negro Modelo hangover is on the rise for obvious reasons. I mean, it's beer, and everybody's stuck in their house drinking beer. So I decided, hey, let's dig into some alcohol-related movies. And so I figured the first one should be about wine because there's actually two things that are fairly interesting about these two movies. Then we'll get into whiskey and beer in the next couple of weeks. But so I chose a movie about something that I haven't seen called Bottle Shock, which is about an interesting topic called The Judgment of France. Are you familiar with The Judgment of France?
I am. Actually, as we were
Both
talking about this movie, yes.
Okay.
As we were talking about this, I was like, going, wait a minute, I actually have seen this movie. That's not a good sign if you don't remember seeing the movie until you talk to somebody else about it.
Yeah.
That's not a good sign.
No, it's not a good sign. But are you familiar with both? Because I'm not familiar with the first Judgment of Paris. What is the first Judgment of Paris? The myth?
You mean the one from the Trojan War?
Yeah.
So Eris, the goddess of discord, although it translates out to strife better, but strife is a complicated concept, she doesn't get invited to a wedding. So she decides to throw a prank. She chucks a golden apple in and says it's for the fairest. So, of course, the goddesses are all kind of beautiful. So they're all competing over who's the fairest. So they go to get Paris, a prince of Troy, and say, hey, buddy, we want you to be a neutral third-party judge here. But because this is ancient Greece, the gods, they go about, bribery. Athena's like, hey, I'll make you smart. I'll make your kingdom plentiful. I'll give you the best military strategy. Hera's like, I'll get you married to the best woman. You'll have the best political power, blah, blah, blah. And then there's Aphrodite's like saying, listen, dude, I'll hook you up with the hottest woman in the world. And he's like, done. Of course, the hottest woman in the world is married. And that starts a little thing called the Trojan War because he steals her from her husband and steals her from her husband in a violation of the law of hospitality, which to the ancient world was the most primal moral law.
So that would be an interesting main plot for this movie, to have something similar while this actual event goes on called The Judgment of Paris. I think that would have been an interesting take on that. But instead, we just got a love triangle that's boring and schlocky and goes nowhere and is kind of lame. So this is about the Judgment of Paris that was the Paris wine tasting of 1976, where at the time, it was viewed around the world that if you wanted a good wine, you got French wine. If you got any other kind of wine, you were getting subpar wine. I think the only real kind of wine outside of that was like Italy, and you only kind of ate that with Italian food, like what's the one that comes in a basket? Why can't I think of it? Chianti. Like, unless you were getting like a Chianti in a basket, like you just didn't get wine outside of France unless you were poor, or you wanted Thunderbolt or something stupid like that. Bum wine. And that's the way the world viewed wine for the entirety of wine. But there was really good wine coming out of Napa Valley in California and Australia, but they didn't touch on that in this movie. But that was the thing that was happening. But the only people that paid attention to California wines were Californians. And there was this sommelier who owned a shop named Stephen Spurrier, who was British, who lived in France. And he was like, hey, let's do a competition, and we'll bring in people outside of France to judge it, and we'll bring in all of the best wine tasters in the world to help promote my shop. And so he went to California to find some kind of different things and be like, let's try to prove that Californian wines are just kind of crap. And while he was there, he was like, oh wow, they actually do have good wines. These could actually compare. So let's bring some in. Brought in the wines. They had the big event. Everybody was like, yeah, France is going to win because California, who cares? And guess who won?
The Californian wine.
Yeah.
Which, if I remember correctly, they pretended to be a French wine to fool the judges.
No, it was a blind tasting. They just put the wines in front of them and said, taste what you want. We're not going to tell you which is which or what is what. And a little winery in California, Napa Valley, named Chateau Montelarier. I don't know French words. Ended up winning. It was a Chardonnay, a vintage 1973 vintage Chardonnay that actually had turned brown before it shipped, but before it shipped, and one of the co-owners found that out and fixed it, because it's actually a really small issue. It actually turns back, no big deal. But this movie makes a lot to do about nothing. It turns that tiny little factoid that's about the wine turning brown before it shipped out to the thing, into a big plot thing, which they ended up throwing away a lot of the wine, and the wine business was going out of business. All of which was made up. All of these kind of side plot details with this love triangle made up. The immigrant who worked at the place and ended up getting fired and doing his own wine on the side, got fired because of that. All made up. He actually never worked for the company until after it ended up winning. Like, all of it was just kind of made up and boring. All the plot points were kind of dumb. There was like this thing where like the father and the son would take out their aggression on each other in a boxing rink because they like to play boxing or whatever. All of it's just made up nonsense. And it made for a kind of boring, dull movie that I had to sit through 2 sittings in order to get through. Don't recommend this. However, if you're interested in wine, that is a really interesting kind of story to read about. There's lots of kind of news articles and stuff about the Judgment of Paris. It's really interesting. The Judgment of Paris. That happened,
the Australians started doing well in the wine.
Yep.
Americans started doing well. Chileans within 10, 15 years later started doing really well.
Yep. Yeah. So that was kind of a moment. And one of the vintage that actually won is actually one of the bottles is actually on display at the Smithsonian. So if you ever want to see it, it's there. That's how much of an impact this thing. It's unfortunate the movie about it was terrible, and it was so bad that Steven Spurrier, the guy who Alan Rickman plays in the movie, actually sued for defamation. I don't know what the result of that was. He actually tried to commission his own film about it, which is still in pre-production, and this one came out, 2005?
Yeah, it's probably covered by the Prince use of clause, which is at the end of every movie, that none of these movies are based off of actual people, and any appearance to a real or imagined person is coincidental.
Yeah. This is not a good movie. Not a good movie. And so I decided to wash that terrible wine down with a good movie, a good Pinot, called Sideways. Now, this is a great movie. I don't want to talk about too much about what's going on in the movie. Basically, the whole plot of the movie is guy gets a divorce. He's really down on his luck. His friend's getting married, and he's like, hey, we're going to go out to Napa. We're going to get you laid because, you're Debbie Downer all the time. Let's just have a good time and forget about the stuff. There's all kinds of like a cheating plot going on. And really great movie. Great performances all around. Paul Giamatti really does prove that he's a versatile and good actor in this, and not just a bit part guy. It's unfortunate that a lot of people kind of shove him in movies as like a bit plot or whatever.
He's a character actor.
Yeah, he's a character actor, and he does a really good job in this movie. That aside, I think what's more important about this movie is that this movie upset the wine industry in both good and bad ways. So before this movie came out, there was like 10 people in the entire world that loved Pinot Noir. Before that, like, nobody gave a shit about Pinot. It was like one of those kind of weird varietals, kind of niche varietals that no one really ever paid any attention to. After this movie came out, it's one of the most popular varietals in wine, and it still is to this day. And honestly, I don't know why. It's not that good of a varietal. Not to say I haven't had good Pinots, but it really is kind of subpar compared to, in my opinion, it's taste subjective. In my opinion, there's a lot of other varietals out there that are really, really, really good and don't get the attention they deserve, like Grenaches. At least in the United States. I know Grenache is like really popular in other places, but either way, so it put Pinot on the map. It also took a big bite out of Merlot, and it only had to do with one line in the movie where they were going into the place, and they were like, And he was like, we're going in there, we're gonna have a good time, and if they order Merlot, we're drinking fucking Merlot. And he's like, no, if they order Merlot, I'm walking out. I'm not drinking any fucking Merlot. And it was completely unnecessary for them to shit on it. And I think that they were just like, not just what's a really popular trendy wine. Oh yeah, we'll just mention that and we'll put that in the movie. Because of that, like, sales for Merlot took a huge hit unnecessarily, because Merlot's a good varietal. It's not a bad varietal. Like, it's kind of trendy, yeah, but it's not bad. And I think that's much more interesting than anything that's happening in this movie. This is like one of my favorite movies. It is probably my favorite alcohol related movie, for sure.
And this movie also really got people into wine tasting in a big way. It really blew up that whole aspect of wine culture.
Yeah. And I remember after this movie came out, like Temecula Valley and Napa Valley were just going crazy, but everybody wanted to come out and taste all the wines in California, which was already sort of popular because of the blow up of California wines. But this movie made everybody go, oh, I'm a wine snob now, because I learned like 5 things that they talked about wine in this movie. Because there's some interesting things you can learn from this movie. Whereas the previous movie that we talked about, they kind of did some it's kind of like superficial information about wine. Whereas this one, there's actually things you can learn about wine in this movie that they explain. Like how to taste wine. They go through the whole process of how you taste wine and how you appreciate wine and all the things that go into wine. And why certain types of wine are better than others and variety. Like they explain all this stuff in the movie. Whereas the other one, they're just like, oh, like people would just taste a wine and they go like, oh, this is amazing wine. It's like, that's not, no, stop that. Yeah, the other one was ridiculous. This is a good movie. Highly recommended if you're interested in drinking wine during your quarantine. I mean, your hangover from delicious Negro Modelo. This is definitely kind of movie to get you interested in the wine culture and the wine culture of Southern California and general wine culture in general. So, yeah. Speaking of drinking heavily.
So next up, we have three pieces of media, a movie and 2 series that are basically about going to purgatory.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Which one first?
I mean, well, let's start with actually this 4. This one is also kind of about purgatory. I do. That accidentally all fell together perfectly.
Yeah, well, yeah. The theme of this show is death.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so this is for the documentary "Their Face When No Girlfriend."
TWF no GF.
The documentary kind of wants to be about incel culture, but it's more about general sad boy, depressed meme culture.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing I want to say is this is perhaps the best media presentation of 4chan culture that I have ever seen.
Unfortunately, it's about a board that we despise.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Robot 9000.
Yeah. Which is clearly a cancer, as this movie adequately explains. So it's about various people who hang out who are depressed because they have internet autism. They live the chicken tendy lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, they can't make friends.
I wonder why. Do you think that maybe it's because they hang out too much on Robot 9000?
9000, yeah. That's a big part of it.
Oh.
But it's very interesting to me that they made an effort to make the meme culture not the villain in the story.
Yeah. This was really well done. I thought it was going to be a giant hit job, and I was really pleasantly surprised that it was not. So that was good on them. The other thing I thought about it is that they actually showed a way out.
Yeah. There's a guy who starts exercising, taking care of himself.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he doesn't make friends or have like somebody there, but
but the potential is there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he even has other like he says he starts getting attention from women now, and but he's like kind of transcended that, and he's like, well, I don't even care about that anymore. I'm just we're interested in making myself better. But it's nice to know it's there when I'm ready.
Huh? And one of the truest lessons you can ever learn is that women are interested in you when you're not interested in them.
I think the more important thing is you can't truly expect anyone to love you if you won't. I think that's the real message that kind of came out of that.
That is certainly one of the messages that it presented. I certainly agree.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about more depressing movies with Jesse Eisenberg.
This is one of the most insufferable things I have ever seen in my life. I'm not even going to say movie because I have seen a lot of insufferable things outside of film, music, just general life. This is probably one of the most insufferable experiences I've ever had. About 2/3 of the movie, I just cashed out. I was like, I'm done. I turned it off. And it mostly had to do with a screaming kid that screams throughout the entirety of the film. I don't know if you've ever had a friend who had a daughter, a young child, specifically female, who has like this really ear-piercing screech that they like to do as soon as they figure out they can make this ear-piercing screech and get attention. They want to do it all the time, and it's insufferable. Well, imagine that, but concentrated into a film. The plot of the movie is Jesse is a handyman. I'm pressing X to doubt that any handyman looks like him. But he's a handyman, and she is a elementary school teacher, and they want to move into a new home so they could potentially have a child. And they come across this weird guy who says that they have this new housing tract where they can go and purchase a house. And so they go to take a look at the house. And during the showing of the house, some weird things are happening, and the guy just leaves them. And they're like, oh, well, he just left. Well, I guess we'll leave too. We're not interested in this place anyway. So they try to leave, and they can't leave. And you immediately go, oh, okay, so they're stuck here. I get it. But guess what they want to do? Guess what?
Said, wait, did you get what our theme is?
Yeah. And so they keep trying to leave.
Make sure you get it.
Yeah, they keep trying to leave for another 30 minutes, and you're like, okay, we get it. They can't leave. They're stuck here. It's purgatory. We get it. Thank you.
Hold up. Are you sure you get it? We need to hammer that theme in some more.
Well, yeah. They keep every single thing. It's just like, oh, this food has no flavor. We get it. You're in purgatory. Can you do something interesting?
Hey, what if we give them a screaming kid that keeps them trapped here?
Yeah. That happens. And it's insufferable, and it's just like, we get it. It just keeps touching your nose saying, hey, they're in purgatory. Hey, screaming kid. Hey, they're in purgatory. I just cashed out, and I was like, I'm done. I can't stand to hear that kid scream one more time. I can't do it. This is absolutely terrible. I don't know why it has a 73% on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know why anybody would put up with this movie, but somebody did, and now we're suffering for it. I don't know why. I also don't know why Jesse Eisenberg, who's done a lot of good stuff, would. I guess he was like the producer of this thing.
He was a producer, and so was the female actress whose name is completely escaping me.
Screeching scream. Yeah, it is a screeching scream. Like, I'm not even going to try to emulate it because I can't. I physically cannot do it. And I can make a little kitten sound, but I'm not going to even try doing this. It's just awful. Awful. Worst movie I've seen this year, except for the murder of Nicole Brown Simpson. Except for that, that's going to be a tough one to beat. I'm sorry.
That is a high bar to beat.
Yeah. Yeah, this is definitely a 2 thumbs down. I'm making Larry give it a thumbs down, even though he didn't watch it.
I didn't watch it, but basically all the reviews are pretty simple.
Yeah,
pretty simple. So we had 2 other pieces of media. One that was new from Amazon, and one that I talked to Jim about the one from Amazon, and I said, "Hey, this is very similar to this other show, and this show was great." And was like, "Yeah, that was a great show. Dead Like Me. Dead Like Me is a great show." But we're going to talk first about Upload from Amazon, because we want to end on a high note with Dead Like Me.
Mm-hmm.
So, Upload is what if science turns heaven into a cell phone plan?
With in-app purchases.
With in-app purchases and underpaid customer service representatives.
Mm-hmm.
That's the premise. Now, Jim, as a Satanist and an atheist, you're at least versed in the afterlife as a concept in religious belief or theology.
Yes.
And you've had a cell phone plan, and you've played video games that have in-app purchases. So, what would you
I've
think
also was very ingrained for many years. In fact, I even had a full-time, well-paying job in a virtual world like this called Second Life.
Mm-hmm.
And Second Life was not this bad. and it was bad.
You made it through 2 episodes. I made it through the whole series. But let me ask you, based on what the premise is, what would you have done in this show, Jim?
Okay, so first of all, I wouldn't have made it so obvious. I would have. This is like one of the things in writing that they tell you to do. Is like they'll tell you to write something, right? And then they go, okay, now that you've written that plot point, throw that in the trash, because that's the first obvious thing. And you want to do something that's a little bit less expected, something that's kind of out of left field. Whereas during the first episode, I had already worked out what had happened throughout the entire season, and I looked it up and I was like, yep, that's what happened. And in the second episode, they were confirming a lot of the things that I was guessing. Should we get into spoiler territories?
I mean, yeah, but like, if you were writing this, what would you have put as your plot points for this show?
So, I mean, if they're going to do that plot of, the kind of murder thing, right?
No, we're not talking about the B plot. We're talking just about the A plot. Heaven is a cell phone.
So I think they had some interesting ideas, and I liked the way that it was executed on delivering those ideas about, the problem with in-app purchases, the problem with cell phone companies, the problem with, the kind of existential question of like, do you really want to die, or do you want to spend your life eternity in some video game? Which I do like the idea of, like, dying and just hanging out in a metaverse where my real life friends can come and hang out, and I can have, what do they call them? What is it? Conjugal visits with the real world. Like, I would like that sort of thing. That seems interesting to me. And unfortunately, the kind of way things are going, we're not going to get something like Second Life. We're going to get something like, what's the latest garbage they're hawking out so far?
Crossing?
No. We're not. I wish it would be like Animal Crossing, because I would more trust Nintendo, because Nintendo is not really big on in-app purchases. Sure, they do DLC stuff, but not as bad as a lot of other companies.
Oh, Raid Shadow Legends?
Like Raid Shadow Legends.
Which is a great game.
Which is a great game, and you should all play it right now and use our coupon code recording in progress. Just kidding. We don't. Never. Well, I don't know. Maybe Larry would. This is his show. But I'm not reading the ads. Won't do it. But yeah, it'd be like Raid Shadow Legends rather than Second Life. But at least with Second Life, you're paying for things that other people have created. And they said, it's basically a market. It's an actual market. Whereas this is much like, hey, you want McDonald's? That'll be $2.99. It's like, but it's digital. You could just give me McDonald's. You could just give it. But they don't just give it. I do like the idea of the kind of, like, of course, there's like glitches in this world. Mm-hmm. Little tiny little details that you don't really notice unless you're paying attention, like how the water animation just, like loops like a GIF. Like things
There's
like that.
Frame rate problems.
Yeah, frame rate problems during peak hours. Little things like that. Like, that's kind of fun. I like that. the kind of commentary about cell phone companies and in-app purchases, like that's all great. The kind of weird neo totalitarian things, tyranny of default, all those kind of concepts are great, but it's kind of ruined by this terrible storyline that's boring, bland, predictable, done a million times. It's rather unfortunate.
Here's what I loved about the murder subplot. So now we're going to kind of roll into some spoilers here for the show. Is they basically had a Koch brother in there in the movie who was a great character. He was my favorite character in the whole series. So the main character doesn't remember what he did for a living, but it's like, oh, I was making basically one of these, but it's freeware. And he's like, oh, so you were murdered. The Koch brother goes,
Yeah.
what? It's like, no, it was an accident. It's like, uh-huh. So you threatened to upend a $600 billion a year industry, and you just accidentally die.
Sure, pal.
Sure,
pal. You die from a car accident, an auto-driving car accident. Sure, pal. You keep thinking that.
I loved how they executed that character.
Yeah, but by the time he said that, I already had figured that out. That's the unfortunate part.
Yeah. Also, the subplot with his girlfriend controlling him, and how, the afterlife and religious rituals are more about your family controlling you. They kind of overdid that.
Yeah.
Plot element.
See, it would be interesting if it was like a relationship that he had for a long period of time. He was seriously considering marrying her, or they were engaged, or they were actually married. And then after she died, she got controlling. Like that would have been much more interesting. But this was kind of like,
he wanted to dump her before he died.
Yeah.
And yeah. But there were other interesting ideas they had, like, oh, well, we can make the dead people work for a living, and we don't have to pay living people. That was an interesting idea that they're probably going to make the focus of a second season, but they should have built more around that idea now.
Yeah. I kind of don't get how... Like, what do you do when everybody you know die? I mean, eventually everybody you know will die.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody who will probably care, unless you're like an author, you're a famous author or whatever, or you contributed something to the ideas or arts. Like, no.
Oh, no. You pay for an eternity of use.
It would make much more sense to get like a life insurance policy, and then they use that money to be like, okay, you bought the eternity plan. Like that would.
Well, no, that's the thing. You buy it for your whole family. You buy the data plan.
Oh. Okay. I guess you really wouldn't need a data plan, would you?
For some reason, you did in this setting.
But why would you need a data? I mean, because it's all in house. It's not like you got to connect yourself to it. I mean, you're in the machine.
Jim,
Yeah.
you're thinking about it more than the people who wrote this did.
Oh.
Because they wanted to have an income inequality plot line.
Oh.
Instead of focusing on hey, we've developed freeware to make free dead people, and also, by the way, make the free dead people work in their afterlife. And the show also had an interesting angle that the lady sitting next to him there on the bench, the digital afterlife, because his wife died before she could be uploaded.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like saying, shouldn't that have been more of like an element to the show of like how you encourage people to go to cyber heaven if their friends or loved ones die? Like, listen, like, you're going somewhere. That's another interesting element they could have applied to the show. But let's talk about a show where they talk about how we deal with the afterlife better. Let's talk about Dead Like Me.
Yeah, they actually thought about this. This wasn't just some like, hey, let's have a little social commentary. We'll work out the details later. Like, sure, there was a lot of details they worked out ahead of time, but then there was also some other things that you can tell, like as they were writing it, like, hey, what if this? Well, hey, let's make that a plot line. So Dead Like Me, it's about Georgia, who was young, kind of, resting bitch face kind of girl. Kind of
didn't have her life together.
Yeah, she was just turned 18. She just got out of high school. She didn't know what to do with her life, but her mom is kind of a bitch. Her dad is cheating on the wife, or cheating on her mom, with one of his students.
Her kid sister's weird.
Yeah, kid sister is kind of weird and invisible, to her at least, but everybody knew her as the weird girl. But she was weird before Georgia died, and she got even weirder after. Who died at her first day at work, first day on the job at a Happy Time, which was sounds like an awful place to work. Who by the Soviet space station that was crashed into the Earth by a toilet seat that fell from the space station.
The Mir space station.
Yeah. And after that happened, the Grim Reaper who came and tapped her got a promotion. I don't know what that promotion does. They never go into it, but he got a promotion. And after he got his promotion, she got tapped to be the next Grim Reaper, whose job it is to go around and collect the souls of those who passed away. There's different kinds of Grim Reapers that are going around in this place from various different times, and they all have various different philosophies on how to tap it. Rube and most of the other Grim Reapers kind of take his philosophy of, we want to do a public service and take your soul before you die, so that after you die, you're not maimed and disfigured, and in this span between you dying and you going to your own little personal heaven, which is like a giant theme park based on what you really liked in life. So I really like whiskey. I guarantee that if I die in this universe, I'm just going to go to basically whiskey land, where I'll probably be like a whiskey sommelier for the rest of my life, or for the rest of my eternity. But good wine, good whiskeys all. Anyways, and then you have, what's her name? The meter maid who's kind of checked out. She really hates everything. Who just goes, we'll just wait for them to die, and after they die, she'll just take their soul and whatever.
And instead of taking them to like a holding position, it's like, listen, I got my meter maid job to do, so you're just gonna ride around with me.
She's like, you're gonna ride with me until I fill my quota. Now, see, here's the problem. If you have a world like this, right, and the living are not supposed to know about all the stuff that's going on in the afterlife, how do you compensate a public service like this? The answer is you can't. They can't even know. There can't be like a government institution paying these people to do a public service because they're not even supposed to know they exist. So they have to do things like squat, steal from the dead, or if they have a problem with that, they're supposed to get a day job. And our friend Georgia here decides she has a problem with stealing from the dead, so she goes, "Hey, I'll just squat and get a day job to eat." Now,
which ends up going back to where she worked before, if I remember.
Yeah, going back to the exact same job she had before, but she did better on her second job interview, so she didn't get stuck in the file collections. She actually got a receptionist job, and she knew how to play Herbig, Dolores Herbig, as in her big brown eyes. And so yeah, she's getting in all kinds of different kind of things. She doesn't want to take souls, and so she tries to figure out ways of kind of neglecting her duties, Rube quickly reminds her that that's a bad idea every time she tries. And she quickly learns her lesson, at least in the first season. Second season, we're not going to talk about that. But in the first season, she kind of figures out that, look, there's no real way of doing this. Death is inevitable. You need to have death. There's a yin and yang kind of situation. And they kind of explore some of the kind of like questions that you would have along the way. Like, well, hey, what would happen if someone didn't make their appointment? We'll make a whole episode about that whole plot line. Like, what would happen if they fell in love? Well, let's do a whole plot line about that. The whole plot lines around, like, how would they get an apartment? How would they make ends meet? The whole episode's about that. So I thought that was kind of interesting that they would explore these ideas, not as just like, hey, let's do a social commentary about cell phone companies, but rather have a message about cell phone companies. Not really, but allegory, really, have like these messages that they're trying to convey as kind of like a central plot and something that you would really actually question about this universe. And I thought that was kind of interesting.
And her parents are still alive, and she's not really allowed to see them, but she cheats all the time at that. She eventually stops seeing her parents, but her sister realizes it's her because she's a weird kid.
Yeah.
And so she's able to finally connect to her sister after she's dead.
Yeah. But one of the things that they kind of touch on is like, well, what would happen if you just try to go and relive your life as you were, connecting to all the people that you loved back in the day? What happens? Well, there's a punishment for that. You actually lose the memories that you try to remember or use as kind of like, hey, this is really me. If you try to be like, hey, I had this imaginary friend when I was a little kid, Mom, remember me? This proves that I'm me. Like, well, when she tried doing that, she was like, hey, I had this friend, and then she completely forgot about that whole experience of her life. That's basically her punishment for trying to do that, and also kind of a failsafe to make sure that that doesn't happen. Yeah. So they kind of explain things in really kind of interesting, novel ways that I really enjoyed. I think during the second season of the movie or the show, it kind of fell apart. They didn't know what to do after that. And I thought there were some interesting things that they could have explored that they did not. But instead, they kind of went back on the path of like, hey, let's get Georgia, just try to get her to figure out ways of cheating death. And I thought that was kind of retreading old tired ground at that point. But the first season, they did not do that, and it was very well done.
Huh?
Yeah.
So we've gone through death and come out the other side. And hopefully soon, movies will be back in theaters.
By the way, there was one other thing I want to point out before we go. All the death scenes in this were kind of almost had comedic timing, and they were very brutal and very violent. And I really thought that was kind of fun that they made something kind of like morbid fun.
The morbid Rube Goldberg device kind of thing.
Yeah. So like pianos falling on people, people getting shocked by the the ab things that electrocute your stomach, that sort of thing. All that stuff is really fun. Yeah.
So we've come out the other side of death, and we're all better for it.
Yeah.
So we're gonna slip out of another episode of Recording in Progress. We will have one next week, like we were supposed to last week and the week before. And worms,
which
is really appropriate for death.
Yes.